Hey friends, you're watching BrainStorm Acres. I'm Henry, and Irene's behind the camera today, so she's helping me out tremendously. You may be able to tell that I have a cold, and I do have a cold. My voice is kind of a mess, and I've been coughing and hacking for a couple of days, so hopefully I'll get over this pretty quick. Today, I'm going to talk about how I'm going about diagnosing and fixing the problems that I've identified so far with the digital vacuum wax injection system. Well, pardon my cold. You can probably tell from my voice that I've got a little bit of a scratchy throat. Well, actually, I have a really runny nose and scratchy throat. So we'll go ahead and go through what we know so far and what's coming to help get through this digital vacuum wax injector project. You probably noticed in the last show that I did on this topic that some things didn't connect up right. Well, let's talk about what I know so far. I know that the connection, this is an electrical connection between this controller and these parts down here work. Now what I don't know is whether or not the control box here actually switches the pressure and vacuum correctly. But I can hear the solenoids click, so that's a good sign. I want to go on to the rest of what's going on. So we can just ignore. Now we can ignore all the electrical goop because it doesn't matter for what I'm trying to solve right now. There are a series of air lines that are supposed to go from one part of the system to another part of the system. Now all of these lines come off the back of the controller. Right here. Now there's a couple of major differences between this picture and what we actually have. The first is that this piece right here is called out as an exhaust port. There's no airline connection in this picture for that exhaust port, but the controller actually has a connection. And we don't actually need to connect it to anything because it's really not going to matter. It's fine if it vents to the air. So that's probably what we'll do. If it's too much of a problem, I'll simply run a tube down below the surface of the cart so it's not bothering Irene when she's using the tool. And there are a number of sizes called out for the tubes that go to all these different portions. There is a port that goes to the clamping portion. So this is the air line that goes to the clamping system to actually cause the clamp to clamp. That's a good thing to have. Fortunately, this port right here, the connector for this port, is the same size as this port over here, which is really good. That means that the tubing that I already have installed will work just fine. Things get interesting when we look at this regulator port. The regulator port says that it's supposed to have a 6mm air line right here, but it isn't 6mm. And the problem here is that all of these connections on the controller and all these various pieces are color-coded with the same color. Now, they really should be different colors. There's an industry standard that blue means that the connection is for a 6mm tube. Black means it's for an 8mm tube. Unfortunately, all of the ports are the same color. And unless you actually try to plug a piece of line in, you can't tell that they're not the right color. So we have a problem right there and right here. So this is a 6mm port here. That's an 8mm port there. There's no conversion units, no adapters to go from 6 to 8 in this kit. Well, not kit, in this product. Now the manual says that you have everything that you need, but that isn't true. So we know that's a problem to start with. Now there's some other things that get in the way. The compressor air supply is supposed to be a 6mm tube. I have a 6mm connector on the compressor. But the air inlet right there is an 8mm port. So it should be an 8mm connection. How do I solve that problem? There's two ways. One is I can change this part that goes to the air compressor on the air compressor to an 8mm fitting, which I may be able to do. But there's no reason for this connection here to be 8mm. So an alternative is that I can go ahead and change out that port connector to a 6mm port connector. But the problem is all of those connectors are basically glued in. So it's very, very difficult to turn them. And I'm concerned that if we shear something off, I'll have a real heck of a time pulling the broken pieces out. So what I'm going to do here is I've ordered some 6mm to 8mm couplers that go between a 6mm tube and an 8mm tube. Now these connectors aren't very expensive. They're about $2 a piece. There's actually, in theory, something like 8 connections that are in here. So I've ordered 10 parts. They should be coming in the next week. Now to complicate things a little bit more, as if it's not already complicated enough, this is going to clamp the air clamp to hold the mold that Irene's going to be injecting wax in. Well, the unit that we have has 2 of these devices. And instead of being a 6mm port, they're 8mm ports. So I have to convert those no matter what. None of this is very difficult, but it takes some determination to stay after it. And one of the things that a few people have commented is that I stay after a project beyond the point when they would have given up. Well, this is the kind of stuff that when you're trying to save some money, you're going to run into. The documentation says one thing, but what you actually get is something different. You have documentation that says these are all 6mm ports, but I know there's 8mm ports as well. Unfortunately, none of those ports are color-coded with industry standard color codes. It just means that I get to go try. In fact, I've already checked all of these to make sure what I need. But in any case, I've ordered all the parts in order to convert all these things from one type to another type so that I can make sure they connect together. Solving this kind of a problem is really one of divide and conquer. What can I actually test? Well, what I could test is all the electronics. That means everything on this side can be tested. But what about the air pressure? Well, I can't test whether or not these valves are actually opening and closing the way they're supposed to. But I can hear them. So unless the valve is actually broken, that's actually a solenoid valve, this control unit has a bunch of valves inside that direct the air pressure one way or another. I can hear those solenoids turning these valves off and on. So this part of the division, I think, is pretty well accounted for. That means all I really have to deal with are these airlines and the things the airlines are connected to. Well, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications, because we're still going to keep on doing things, and hopefully my voice will get better.
And you get to see Rufus meeting the Roomba today. Another adventure.
Thanks for watching. We'll talk with you later.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, keep brainstorming. It's important.